Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. It's a real honor and a privilege. So,
Likewise.
so you have many years' experience in IP in the United States. How is the current COVID-19 situation impacting the patent space in general, and which are the major changes you've seen in the last few months?
Well, one thing that, of course, we've seen is an increase in courts using remote technology to allow lawyers and witnesses and participants to appear by video. I think before COVID, it was pretty typical for courts to allow telephonic appearances, but those were usually limited to status conferences or non-substantive proceedings. And since COVID, we've seen actually not only settlement conferences, but dispositive motion hearings happening, and some trials actually happening by video conference, which is new territory for sure. I think also one thing that's interesting and we've noticed is that although most litigation in the United States is down, patent litigation actually seems to have experienced a slight uptick since COVID happened. It's up year over year compared, if you look at the first few months of 2020 compared to 2019, but it also isn't just up in January and February before COVID started making its presence felt more severely in the United States. It's actually up a little bit since March. So we'll have to keep our eye on that and see if it continues.
Going back to what you had originally mentioned, that there were a lot of more virtual trials and things like that, do you feel like any of those technologies may be here to stay after this settles down?
I think for sure, many people have had very positive experiences with them. There have also, of course, been a few security warnings out there. So participants have to be careful, follow the guidelines, make sure we update our software routinely so that we have the latest updates and protections. But I think people are really enjoying them and getting a lot of efficiency out of them. So there are certain proceedings that really should happen in person if at all possible. And I don't think that this will eliminate in-person jury trials, for example. But I do think that for many matters, a lot more people will be using video conferencing technology even after COVID is hopefully a distant memory.
So, as the chair of intellectual property litigation at Stris Maher, you lead the firm's intellectual property litigation practice. What challenges and opportunities does the current situation present in this line of work in particular?
Well, one of the challenges is certainly to continue to provide excellent, seamless service to our clients, even though we can't go into our offices and meet together. I think many firms are experiencing the ability to rise to that challenge. With some firms, they're such large platforms that I know they had a concern about whether their servers would support everyone working remotely. We are a boutique, Stris Maher, and so fortunately, we had a lot of people traveling and working at different times we had the ability to work remotely even before COVID hit. So that wasn't as much of a transition for us, but it's still a big challenge. We had one matter that was set to go to trial on April 6th, and of course that was continued to a date to be determined, but it became very hard to do meaningful trial preparation in March once COVID really became a presence in the United States.
Do you see your clients cutting back on the litigations, maybe even dropping them because of the financial situation?
Certainly, I think for some litigation, there'll be an assessment that now is not the time to pursue it. For other litigation, the opposite may be taking hold. So that's one potential explanation for why patent cases are on the rise now. They tend to be easy to initiate remotely, and you can progress in a patent case remotely up to a certain point. It would tend to be years before you would get to the point in a patent case where the in-person meeting would become more essential. So it's certainly the case that some patent owners or patent holders will try to take advantage by filing now, hoping that the targets of those lawsuits will elect to settle quickly rather than expend the resources to fight in this environment. But I also haven't seen any indication that that is necessarily going to pay off. In other words, the whole community may see the same level of activity, and people may not be quicker to fold. So with respect to patent litigation, it could be kind of an outlier. I do think for sure in other kinds of litigation, people seem to be holding off more, at least for now.
So are you saying that in regards to patent litigation, some companies may see that other corporations are in jeopardy, so they may actually pursue a lawsuit now because assuming that the other company is going to settle and not want to go into this expensive litigation case?
It does seem that there may be a number of patent suits filed with that hope in mind, that now would be a particularly good time to try to strike and get an early settlement as opposed to having a defendant elect to fight. But it remains to be seen whether the defendants will all actually go that route.
It seems on the one hand, the plaintiff, it may be becoming more aggressive because of the financial situation on the defendant's side, that they won't fight it. However, have you seen on the plaintiff side that things they would have fought in the past, they may not be pursuing because of their financial situation?
In our particular practice, we haven't seen that yet. However, I think it certainly could be affecting many would-be plaintiffs, depending on their particular financial circumstances and on how much their business or their individual circumstances have been impacted by COVID-19.
From what I understood is that a crisis usually tends to bring out innovation and people working on things that they wouldn't have thought of before. And now, because technology is so strong, and that's your field, I would assume, maybe I'm being maybe I'm premature on it, but I would assume that many companies are now actually software companies and technology companies, as well as medical devices and pharma. They're actually they're throwing more patents, they're filing more patents in order to protect their space as quickly as possible. Do you think, if that would be true, do you think that that may in the future create a lot more, like in a few years from now, once those things come public, do you think there's going to be a lot more IP litigation on that front?
It certainly could lead to that. What tends to happen is that we see a cycle where there's early innovation, and then sometimes the company doesn't succeed, but it has patent assets that are sold off. And frequently the cases that are filed, the litigations that are filed in the United States, many of them are born from former operating companies that didn't survive. So in the current circumstances, there's an incentive program with the US Patent Office where small entities up to 500, I think, in the initial wave will receive faster patent prosecution, faster review of their applications. So many more people than 500 could attempt to get those patents. And if those patents are ultimately granted, but the technology isn't the front runner technology, we could certainly see an uptick later in patent litigation that happens as a result of the vast number of people trying to get patents that don't necessarily become the 1 or 2 or 5 most important or significant commercialized innovations.
So do you feel this may be an opportunity for many corporations to actually buy patents on the market and get good deals?
I am aware that there has been a lot of movement of patents, but I am not sure if the deals that are happening now they must be perceived as good since many more are happening. I think we're aware that patent assets are trading hands, but we haven't really got visibility into the details of those transactions.
But are there more transactions than previously because of the situation?
I have seen that reported informally by Unified Patents, yes. So my understanding at least informally, is that there's been high activity in terms of acquiring patent assets.
So you've been in the patent litigation space for a long time, and there may be foreign associates around the world that may be watching. What would you tell them if you had 30 seconds or less? What would you tell them they should expect from the U.S. economy and the innovation in general in the U.S., which they rely so heavily on?
I would tell them to stay hopeful. We all have to collaborate and work together and stay strong. And I believe that we will get through this and we will see not only American innovation, but innovation around the world, bringing people together and working together to not only defeat COVID, but also find innovative ways to work around the challenges of having to be remote while we all try to flatten the curve and eliminate the virus.
So Elizabeth, is there anything else you would like to add that reflects how IP has been impacted by the global reality that we're currently living in?
I think it's too soon to say specifically how IP has been impacted, other than there's certainly incentive to innovate now, as you've pointed out. And like other sectors, we are experiencing the ability to form new relationships virtually. So thank you for this series and for the opportunity to exchange information and learn about what's happening in IP around the world, because I think it can only help. And I think with luck, we'll see more of that even once the health crisis is a distant memory.